Hey, there's a link in the description to leave a comment in the Federal Register. It's an open comment period, and if you politely tell your Kratom story to Health and Human Services and WHO, you could help prevent international controls on Kratom eventually down the road. So click on that link, leave your comment, and we left a little bit of instructions for you, and we talk about this issue later in the podcast. Thank you. This is the Kratom Science Journal Club with Dr. Jonathan Cachet, neuroscientist and expert in psychopharmacology. In each episode, we discuss an article in a peer-reviewed journal. I'm your host, Brian Gallagher, blog and social media writer for KratomScience.com, your source for all things Kratom. Today, we're looking at a preliminary study into the question of whether a combination of Kratom Alkaloids and chemotherapy drugs can be more effective in killing or slowing cancer cells. Nothing on KratomScience.com, including this podcast, constitutes medical advice. See a doctor if you're sick. Gregory Dominic sent this to me, so thank you, Gregory Dominic. This is a group out of Malaysia that studied this. Darshan Singh's a former Kratom Science podcast guest, and this was published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, and it's called Combinations of Indole-Based Alkaloids from Mitragynous Speciosa Kratom and Cisplatin Inhibit Cell Proliferation and Migration of Nasopharyngeal Carcinoma Cell Lines. Okay, so Kratom is aiding in chemo in this study with killing throat cancer cells. That's the alternative title I just made up.
There we go.
Yeah, what they did, it was like a combination of the chemo and Kratom alkaloids that they studied on cell lines. I think it was kidney. Nasopharyngeal carcinoma is a malignant cancer which manifests in the nasopharynx, specifically in the pharyngeal recess, so it's back of your throat, basically. They got the kratom, and they extracted the alkaloids from a plantation in Malaysia, which it's weird because kratom is illegal in Malaysia, but yet it's all over the place. So it's illegal, but it's so many people use it because it just grows wild everywhere, and they can't really control all of it. This is University of Science, Malaysia.
I work down at the University of Science there.
They just went and got it from a plantation, so it's kind of weird. Dr. Singh was explaining kind of like the law to me, and he did a study of kratom consumers, and but it's technically against the law, but it's everywhere. It's kind of like weed is. Has been here for the past 40, 50 years. So, cisplatin is a chemotherapy drug used to treat testicular, ovarian, bladder, head, neck, lung, and cervical cancer. I looked that up. And they even talk about in the introduction and in a traditional context, kratom is commonly used to treat cancer. This is just traditional use. And they point
I'm surprised by that. Have you come across studies that have said that? Wasn't expecting that to pop up.
Yeah, no, not really. I just did an article based on this study where I was looking at like combinations of herbal medicine or traditional medicine with modern, chemotherapy. Because that's what my mom did. She took a tea called Essiac tea, and she thought it helped her. But she was also doing a chemo. She didn't, not go to the doctor. That wouldn't be a good idea if you have cancer. I've heard of some people saying that. There's a bad medical claim on a dietary supplement or something, and some people think, oh, well, I don't have to go get chemo. I'll just take this supplement, and then they end up dying of cancer. I've heard a few stories like that. So
Steve Jobs.
Anybody that listens, yeah, Steve Jobs, really. Yeah, so anybody that listens to this thinking this means kratom cures cancer, it doesn't. It actually, the alkaloids are acting as chemosensitizers, so it actually helps the chemotherapy. That's kind of the result from this one study. But
yeah. But it seemed like basically during the chemo treatment, like chemotherapy is basically introducing like controlled introduction of cytotoxic compounds that kill the cells, cytotoxic. And one of the bummers is like there aren't really that many targeted chemotherapies, so it kills the cancerous cells and the good cells alike. And in any situation where you're having like targeted death, you're going to end up developing like some sort of resistance. So I think that basically what they were saying is over time they'll get resistance to this cisplatin, and it severely reduces its efficacy in subsequent treatments. And so by combining the cisplatin with other natural compounds, if it can resensitize the cancerous cells to the effects of that chemotherapy agent, that's good. It lowers that tolerance and makes the treatment more effective. There's a lot here too. I mean, it's interesting the different assays they did, but I would just give the disclaimer that I did not study cancers in grad school, so I'm going to do my best to help us navigate through here. But I think we're on the same page as we enter into some of this methods and materials.
Okay, and it says we aim to investigate the effect of speciociliatine alkaloids and cisplatin as single agents as well as in combination on proliferation and migration of the NPC, that's the cancer cell lines, using monolayer culture and in spheroids. It says the spheroids resemble a microenvironment and architecture closer to tumors in vivo and therefore serve as a more physiological model to study cell invasion and drug sensitivity.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I was like, I'd never heard of that.
It looks like three-dimensional cell cultures that arrange themselves during proliferation into sphere-like formations.
Okay.
You observed them in a hamster lung cells when they were grown by themselves. So yeah, my guess would be it's they're taking the cancerous cells or the cell culture, letting it grow on itself, and it forms these spheroids that are then more closely relevant to the biological conditions in which the cancer has grown.
Yeah. Extraction of plant material. They used a hot maceration method with 5 liters of methanol to extract the kratom from the leaves, or the alkaloid from the leaves.
Mm-hmm. They did a lot of filtering, so they're defattening it with a base or acidic solution, and then there was different washes with N-hexane 3 times. And then the biggest stuff that I was surprised of here is just that they, in order to do further purification, they fractionated the alkaloid extract with a gel column, like a chromatography. So they had the 7 major fractions, F1 through F7, where F2 and it looks like F6 had the highest concentrations, or at least the most inhibitory activity when applied to this cancerous cells. So they basically made a giant liquid extract from the kratom leaves and then ran it through a purification column to get different fractionations, and presumably the different fractionations contain different ratio of alkaloids.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask about that because I wasn't sure about the fractions. That's just like amount of mitragynine?
Yeah, so the amount of mitragynine, but then they also were looking at 2 others. We had
speciociliatine and peinanthine and speciociliatine. Yeah.
And the ratios of those were different in each of the fractions based on what their column contained.
Okay, yeah. So they're looking at just the cisplatin, what it does, and then in combination with just mitragynine, and then in different combinations, I think, of the different alkaloids to see how it acted. And they're trying to ultimately kill the cancer cells. That they have cell lines. They're in a petri dish, I assume, or something. And so the whole experiment is to see if the kratom alkaloids would help kill the cancer cells.
And it's pretty interesting too. I mean, later on, so they get into the results, but like just the mitragynine by itself, or just any of the other alkaloids by themselves, were not as effective. And it sort of goes back to this, affect the full spectrum or the entourage effect that we frequently reference.
Yeah, and it said MPC cell lines were insensitive to single-agent treatment of M. speciociliatine. So they found that the kratom actually by itself, or the alkaloids by themselves, don't actually do anything to the cancer cells, but in combination with the chemo drug cisplatin, they actually increase. I think not painanthine by itself, but there's a combination of MPC HK1 cells were subjected to a combination of mitragynine and speciociliatine at a 1:1 compound ratio. The cells were insensitive to the combination. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just saying under 3.2, treatment of the M. speciosa alkaloids 1 to 4, they did 4 of them, did not significantly increase the cytotoxicity of the cancer cells, but they were subjected to a combination of mitragynine and speciociliatine at a 1:1 compound concentration ratio, and the cells were... It says the cells were insensitive to the combination. Okay, so just the kratom alkaloids alone didn't do anything to the cancer cells, but in combination with cisplatin, that's section 3.3. I think, let me see which ones actually affected it. I think painanthine didn't affect it on its own.
They did at higher concentration. So this figure 3, is pretty interesting in that it shows as they increase the concentration of the cisplatin relative to the kratom alkaloids, that it's only in these higher doses are we seeing a synergistic effect between the two drugs. Almost everything up until that point is an antagonism. So it's actually preventing the effects of this cisplatin chemotoxic agent.
Okay. Do you mean even with the other alkaloids? With the kratom alkaloids, it's preventing it.
Yeah, so at like low doses. So if you have 8 micromolars of mitragynine with 0.25 micromolar of the cisplatin, it was an antagonistic effect. So I'm not exactly sure how they're defining antagonism, but it seems like it's heavily dose dependent, and that in order for them to work together, we need higher doses of the cisplatin.
3.4, it says the assay demonstrated the potential of mitragynine and cisplatin as a combination and significantly inhibiting the migration across both cell lines. Now, do you know what they mean when they mean migration? Is that just basically multiplying and growing?
So I think this has to do with the 2D cell culture that they're using. And so naturally our skin, for example, is a 3D cell culture. There are gradients present, but there's no like prescribed polarity, meaning like positive and negative ends. It's just sort of everything all mixed together. When they use these 2D cell cultures, there's usually 2 layers, and they can force a polarity. So they can make the top negative and the bottom positive and force negative ions to move towards the positive or the reverse towards the negative. And so I think when they're talking about migration here, I think they're talking about the movement of the cells across that 2D gradient. But, again, disclaimer, have not worked with cell cultures in cancer context.
And it's an inhibition of spheroid growth and invasion were already obvious at a combination of 16
micromolar
of mitragynine and 2 of cisplatin. The reduction in spheroid growth and invasion was more significant in the presence of 16 of mitragynine and 4 of cisplatin. That's more like mu-m, isn't it? It's not u. It's a Greek letter.
Yeah, it's micro, yeah.
Okay. Moreover, the spheroids did not rapidly develop resistance to the drug combination at higher concentrations. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's good. I mean, it just goes to show that, like, after if they've developed this tolerance to the cisplatin and we add in the mitragynine, the combination of those two is much more effective at killing the cancer cells.
Okay, yeah. And in the discussion, it says our results show the mitragynine and speciociliatine sensitized the NPC cells to cisplatin fourfold at concentrations close to its IC50 values. Based on these results, it can be inferred that these compounds can be used as effective chemosensitizers to cisplatin. So they're saying that mitragynine and speciociliatine were the two they found that can help in cisplatin, help to kill cancer cells.
And I think I would, in most of the podcast episodes we talked about, it's usually about chronic pain and treatment of chronic pain, and we can compare it to opiates. This, at least in my book, this was a 2021 study. I would still consider these results like very preliminary, if not the first to actually even investigate this. So, for our listener out there, I would not say that this is something that you want to run to your doctor to and change your, the treatment of your grandma's cancer or your mom's cancer. It's very promising and very interesting, but there's still a lot more to unpack here. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Because I've never seen another study on this topic. So it seems like, and they probably even say this somewhere in the paper as well.
Yeah, and the one paper that they did cite that says it has like anecdotal use for cancer treatment was really just a sort of like field notes from anecdotal studies. I had not heard anything like this. Is the first I've heard about this topic in the scientific publications, at least.
Yeah. So what do you know what the wound healing assay is?
I think it's about rate of wound healing, and so okay. I am completely sort of interpreting between the lines here.
Okay.
But in chemotherapy, there's a lot of immune response repressor compounds that are added, because basically you want to allow the chemotactic agents to kill the cells. You want them to be cytotoxic.
Yeah.
Where your body's immune system is like, what are you doing? We don't want this at all. Like we need to fight back against this. And so where you end up is like, people who are on blood thinners have trouble forming scabs, and that can be a potentially like life-threatening problem. With wound healing, I'm pretty sure the primary endpoint that they're looking at is rate of wound healing. And you can sort of see it, if I'm interpreting this right, in figure 5 correctly, to where there's sort of like what looks to be like a small gun wound. It's probably not that. It's probably like a puncture wound. They made the cell assay, and then they did some mechanical damage to make that puncture. But you can see over on the far right and towards the bottom, the sort of the degree or the severity of this puncture wound has changed. And I think that what they're basically trying to demonstrate is that the immune response can still be functional in the presence of both mitragynine and the cytoplatin, and it might actually even help with wound healing. So like the amount of wound healing that you see and the rate at which it is begun to be healing is of interest. Whereas like, standard chemotoxic agents can suppress that response. But again, that and figure 6 show sort of the same thing, like almost complete destruction and then the wounds healing back up. That's my neuroscientific approach to what I read about today. Don't take me to task on it.
We're looking at the pictures that look like black dots or something. Is that the one you're looking at? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I can see that now. Yeah, because it's like the cells are all over they're all over the place, and then it's like smaller and
this is over 10 days of treatment, steroids treated with a single agent over the 10-day. Yeah. There were no resistance observed in the highest concentration over 10 days.
And it even says, at the end, the mechanism of action of the speciociliatine alkaloids in combination of cisplatin is currently unknown. So that just kind of points to how early this study is. They don't even know what is actually going on. They just observed what was going on. So they don't even know how the kratom alkaloids are doing this yet.
Right. Yeah. They needed to do this preliminary study to see if there was something there. Like, is there even anything there? And so it would appear that there is some mechanisms to uncover that are worth more investigation based on these preliminary results.
it might be good to say that, Kratom just actually makes people feel better, and somebody's going through cancer, there's a lot of nausea and stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, if I had cancer, and I would talk to my doctor about everything I'm putting in my body, but
yeah, I was thinking that same thing on those anecdotal reports, like using Kratom when you have cancer, just to feel better and to feel less pain, to sort of just deal with the symptoms of cancer rather than fighting the cancer back directly, is probably what most people are using Kratom for if they have cancer. We've said, this is the first that I've actually had any scientific paper or scientific empirical studies that put Kratom to task to say, can these compounds actually help in the chemo treatments? And it looks like yes. I mean, it looks like there's enough here to say yes, but learn more and very preliminary.
Yeah, and it seems like not all the alkaloids work, so I wouldn't be sure that taking just Kratom would do anything to help the cisplatin, because they have very specific alkaloids, like mitragynine is one of them, and that's the most abundant one in Kratom, but so 2 of the alkaloids didn't work, so it's not known if just drinking Kratom tea along with chemo would do anything at all. You might have to have mitragynine, and I don't know I'm sure they don't even know if it should be injected or swallowed, or
these are all these are not in vivo. They're in vitro models, but they are not in a whole organism. So there's a whole slew of potential interactions that aren't necessarily being captured by these type of experiments. You have to obviously start somewhere, but the fact that these aren't in vivo, meaning like in a whole organism, like a whole mouse or a whole rat, we don't know what if these results will carry over.
Yeah, and it's not even it's not even a mouse study yet. It's just cells at this point. So I knew there was going to be blog posts about this one, and there was, and it was like, look, Kratom helps cure cancer. That's a little. Yeah,
don't run to the newsprinters with that news yet. Like, we still want to just keep Kratom around for what it's primarily used for, and that is as an alternative to opiates. I would not run to the legislatures and the regulators talking about curing cancer just yet. Stick with cannabis on that one.
Yeah. Well, cannabis has shown that it helps with cancer, right?
Yeah. One of the safest and most potent sort of immunomodulators that we're aware of, and especially cancer in neuronal cells of the nervous system. But so we know that CB1 is primarily the receptor. CB1, cannabinoid receptor 1, is on nervous tissues and nervous system. Cannabis receptor 2 is primarily expressed in the immune system. And so I think there are several mechanisms proposed, but due to that high concentration on the immune system, it can help regulate immune responses in a way unlike a lot of other agents that we have. And so, I think that there's good evidence, and at least stuff that I had pulled when I had a family member get diagnosed, where if the tissue that the cancer is affecting is highly expressing the cannabinoid 2 receptors, we generally have really good results with lowering tumor size, lowering tumor growth, and potentially tumor elimination. I would 100%, like I hinted at with cancer, of course, pass it by your doctor, because some doctors in some states can get weird about cannabis use and cancer treatment. But otherwise, that would be one of my first jump tos before going into chemo, is like, let me see what I can do as much as I can with cannabis and cannabinoids, especially in light of the fact that, like, and I was just actually talking about this with a neurologist over the weekend, where there is like very, very, very little downside to trying medical cannabis for your ailments or whatever symptoms you have, in that it will either do nothing or it could, be potentially life-changing for you. There's very little downside. There's no overdose risk. There's no damage being done. Whereas like, even with chemo, you're still killing a bunch of cells and you're still going to feel weak and you're still going to feel nauseous. So of course, run it by your MD or your team of MDs, most likely if you have a cancer diagnosis. But I would start with cannabis before kratom, 100%.
Yeah, and what, just THC or CBD, or is there
generally as much as the body can take. I mean, so when we were like actually helping, we had a dispensary in California where we were actually helping patients, and so we had several different like cancer patients that had different types of cancer. And broadly speaking, the approach is get as many cannabinoids in your system as you can tolerate for as long as you can, because there's no overdose or like lethal risk or any potential risk like that. Like most people just like, if they're older, they don't want the paranoia that comes with the THC, which is fine. Okay, take THC out, but you still want to get CBD, CBDA, CBG, CBC, like as many cannabinoids as you can physically tolerate is the best approach. And, I think, being so stoned that you're couch locked and have to watch, TV for a few weeks, I still think is a better alternative to chemotherapy in my mind. But, just like we started this out, their chemotherapy exists for a reason, and it's shown to be effective for a lot of different, even like resistant types of cancer. So you don't want to Steve Jobs it and just blow it off and then have to leave the world. But I would say starting with cannabis for almost any like symptomology is a healthy sort of first step before you jump off the deep end into chemo.
Yeah. Oh man. I hope I don't have to think about that. But I'll definitely get super stoned if I ever get cancer.
If I have to, all right.
Twist my arm. and it also, for a lot of people, stimulates appetite and helps you sleep. And maybe it helps some people relax. But and that's kind of what they said about kratom too. It helps. If it helps you and your well-being in general, then it might help you fight off anything. But
and there's something to be said for that. Positive mental attitude can take you a long way. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'm going to talk about this anyway. I was just going to make an announcement, but there's the FDA is seeking comments for, or HHS is seeking comments for the WHO. They have like 6 substances they're concerned about, and the one is kratom, and they have a public comment period open, and we have a link on Twitter, and I'll probably put it in the description, but it's important that people share their kratom story in the federal. It goes right into the federal registry, so I don't think the FDA handles the comments, or I don't think they're able to delete them or whatever, because it goes right into the federal registry. But they're asking people to share their kratom story, and this hopefully will get to the WHO, and they'll consider whether or not to recommend an international ban of kratom.
Tell me about this. So I saw some flurry activity from AKA regarding I thought the Health and Human Services said we're going to maintain the course and not try to ban kratom. But now this is on a larger stage with international drug scheduling and WHO, right? World Health Organization.
Yeah. It's for the WHO, and I think it's just a recommendation. I don't know if it's going to affect the laws, but the worst that could happen is if they recommend this thing be scheduled, and then all their members, a lot of the member countries, start outlawing it worldwide. So I think it is important to comment on it. I'm not sure if it's going to affect our laws or Indonesia's laws, but it'll give the people who want to ban kratom extra weight if the WHO is saying ban this stuff. So there's an open comment period that's required, that the FDA asks for the comments, but the comments are entered into the Federal Register. So I don't think I don't think there's any evidence that the FDA can do anything about the comments. It's important to comment, and I'll have a link in the description. And
yeah, I just clicked through. It looks like comment period ends in
August 9th. Yep.
Almost 2,400 comments thus far, and all the ones that I just was clicking through on were all, just a paragraph on. One of them was, my husband is a construction worker. He fell and hurt himself. He was on pills for a while, and the Kratom helped him get off of those pills and helped improve his quality of life. And I don't think no one should underestimate the amount of help that those type of comments can be. You don't have to put a lot. You can do it anonymously, but including some details on why Kratom has helped you or not. We're not trying to stack the deck here, but it seems to be by and large that the comments are helpful. And it looks like they're looking at a bunch of different narcotics too. It looks like an MDMA, there's an MDMB research drug, and then broorphine. It's like morphine, but with bro in front of it.
I'm wondering if Joe Rogan made that one up. He's probably in his supplements. They always say he's a bro. Phenibut's another one. I actually just ordered some because I was interested in that, because it's a GABA. It's a GABA one, and I just wanted to see if I took a small amount and it would make me not desire alcohol or something like that. But we'll see what happens with that. It's supposed to be coming in the mail, but since they're thinking about outlawing it, I just want to try it now.
Yeah, gosh, well, it's inviting. Yeah, FDA is inviting people, and what's a bummer about all of this, and I don't really know how the World Health Organization wants to continue doing this, but the idea of scheduling drugs on the international stage was primarily an idea from the United States. This notion of the schedules and how things are ranked in the schedules, all of that is basically a carbon copy of US policy. And it's basically taking, poor US drug policy and then now throwing that over the rest of the world. And they're still dealing with the repercussions of trying to unschedule cannabis. And so I don't know necessarily if they're rushing in to try to schedule these things, but I feel like if I was on this board, considering any international drug scheduling, that I'd be very hesitant of just throwing stuff into Schedule 1 and we'll deal with it later, because unfortunately there is not prescribed mechanisms for dealing with these things later. They have to go back and make new rules, or never have things scheduled in the first place if we're going to go back on some of these. So hopefully they're taking their time. You're right, if they ban it on the international stage, I don't necessarily think that means that it would be banned immediately in the US, but it would certainly give them stronger ground to stand on. And I'm thankful for groups like Kratom Science and other advocacy groups in the Kratom community that are making these things available. So definitely there's no harm in just going to this website. I went to the Kratom Science Twitter, and it's the pinned tweet up at top. You can just click right into the Federal Registry and get a comment in there.
And one more thing I read about this. So there's steps that although FDA, here's what it says. This is on the request for comments. Although FDA is through this notice requesting comments from interested persons, which will be considered by HHS when it prepares an evaluation of these substances. HHS will not now make any recommendations to WHO regarding whether any of these drugs should be subjected to international controls. Hence, HHS will defer such consideration until WHO has made official recommendations to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, which are expected to be made in late 2021. Any HHS position regarding international control of these substances will be preceded by another Federal Register notice soliciting public comments. So there's going to be another opportunity to comment if HHS decides to recommend a international ban, but hopefully the HHS will continue the last policy of not recommending it. And Rachel Levine, the new assistant secretary, I don't know if this matters because its politics are so convoluted, but she used to be a medical marijuana advocate, and she's the reason I can legally get medical marijuana in the state, because they expanded the conditions you could have to anxiety. So basically anybody can tell a doctor they have anxiety and get a prescription now, which is good. Hopefully, so the pressure should be on HHS, I think, to continue their policy of not recommending a ban to either the DEA or the WHO. And I don't know how you can actually study the drug situation closely and think, oh, well, let's ban them. That'll work.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's decades and decades now of almost probably 100 years of not working. So
yeah. Let's double down on it now. That'll work. Yeah. It's just the war on drugs was lost. Drugs won. So I'm looking at this comment field here too, and it says, what is your comment about? And there's a drop down that starts with like academia and animal feed. There's drug association, drug industry. Which one do we want to pick for this case?
Okay, that's important. And this is from the AKA, and it ends in 37. It's international
government. That's what ends in 37.
Yeah, international government. Which that part sucks because it does not say it in the request for comments. So when you're commenting on it, you're actually commenting on that, because you can still read the request right there. Yeah, I mean, the AKA said you should pick international government I0037 when it says what is your comment about. But I just have no idea how anybody would know that. I'll put that in the description as well.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up. I was curious myself. It just seemed like such a juxtaposition. Like, HSS isn't going to do anything. Now who's going to do something? It's like, no rest for the weary.
Yeah, it's like whack-a-mole with these. I was talking to Drew Turner about it, and it's like they have something else up their sleeve. It's just if they can't schedule it here, they're going to try to put international controls, which I don't know what that would mean. Would it mean we can't ship Kratom into the country from Indonesia anymore? I don't know. It's just all kind of unclear.
I don't know.
But nothing's going to happen until at least later this year, and it'll just be a recommendation to the WHO. The WHO doesn't control any country's laws. I think every country has to still go through a process of scheduling it according to their own laws. But it just wouldn't be good. It just wouldn't be good if they WHO comes out against Kratom.
It's not a step in the right direction.
Yeah, please comment on that link in the Federal Register before August 9th. And be a patriotic, Kratom-using American and put it in the public record. Thank you, Dr. Jonathan Cachet. You can find him at @JCachet on social media. Music is Captain Big Wheel. Song is Moon Runner. Kratom Science podcast is written and produced by me, Brian Gallagher, for KratomScience.com. Take care.